With Shudder's release of Cursed, a documentary series focusing on the tragedies that surrounded the films The Crow, The Exorcist, Poltergeist, and The Twilight Zone, the phenomenon of cursed films is something that's become very popular in cinephile culture. However, when talking about cursed movies, it's important to make the distinction between a cursed movie and simply a serious tragedy that happened on set. I'm Jess from What Culture, and here are 10 films you didn't know were secretly cursed. Number 10. The Passion of the Christ. Mel Gibson's violent and bloody retelling of the final days of Jesus Christ was an incredibly polarizing film once finished. Some people loved it, some people hated it, some people were just plain scared of it, and if production stories are to be believed, there were powers beyond our fathoming that weren't happy to see it finished either. In multiple interviews after the film's release, Jim Caviezel, who played the role of Jesus himself, gave eye-opening accounts of how the production was rife with problems. Some of it can be put down to the punishing way the film was made, as Jim was accidentally whipped properly twice during the infamous torture scenes, leaving a 14-inch scar down his back. He dislocated his shoulder from the weight of the cross, and he contracted pneumonia from being strung up on said cross in the middle of an Italian winter. It sounds brutal already, but that's all explainable. What's harder to explain is that during the scene of the Sermon on the Mount, Caviezel was struck by lightning from the heavens, to which his hair caught fire because of it. He wasn't seriously harmed, but maybe there was a certain heavenly body that also hated the fact that this was being made, and decided to make itself known. Number 9. Moulin Rouge. Although the film itself is relatively harmless, as it's a jukebox musical about the goings-on of a Parisian nightclub and not some deep delve into the supernatural or fantastic, Baz Luhrmann's incredibly successful screen sing-along was an absolute nightmare behind the scenes, and it changed the lives of those who starred in it. There were so many accidents that it's hard not to call the movie cursed with tragedy. Nicole Kidman bore the brunt of the misfortune as she broke a rib by falling during a dance scene, and broke another rib thanks to the tight corset she wore. She also tore the cartilage in her knee from falling down a set of stairs, meaning that Luhrmann had to film Kidman from the waist up for some scenes because she was in a wheelchair. This cartilage tearing also meant that Kidman had to drop out of filming David Fincher's Panic Room. John Leguizamo also suffered at the hands of the Moulin Rouge because he needed physical therapy after filming was all over, as his prosthesis caused his spine to compress. Even after all that, Moulin Rouge was still cursed when it was released, because although a lot of delays were put into place so the film could be finished, its release date coincided with Star Wars Episode 2, which dominated the box office. It seems that fate just wasn't in Luhrmann's favor for this venture. Number 8. Resident Evil: The Final Chapter. The last Resident Evil movie is a very strange film to be considered cursed, as the series was based on a very successful video game series and were, in all honesty, just a mediocre set of action films. Why Resident Evil: The Final Chapter was fraught with misfortune is beyond me. The most noteworthy incident was the fate of stunt woman Olivia Jackson. She was set to record a high-speed motorcycle stunt for the movie where a camera rig was to be raised above her. The 2 practice runs beforehand had gone perfectly fine, but when it came time for the actual take, a small change in positioning caused the camera's timing to be off by 1 second, thus causing Olivia to collide with the camera, swerve out of control, and crash wildly, causing horrific injury to her arm, which had to be amputated. She wasn't the only victim, as 2 months after the severe accident, Ricardo Cornelius, a South African crew member, died when a Humvee slid off a rotating platform, crushing him and his lungs. Even before The Final Chapter, the 2012 movie Resident Evil Retribution had an incident during production where a high-wheeled platform collapsed, causing 12 extras to suffer injuries bad enough that they needed to be taken to hospital. Number 7. Gone in 60 Seconds 2. Not a sequel to the Nicolas Cage action film, but 1989's Gone in 60 Seconds 2 was supposed to be a sequel to the original Gone in 60 Seconds from 1974, an independent movie written, directed, produced, and starring stunt driver H.B. Halicki. Halicki was very cavalier with his production of the original movie, with one incident where Halicki compacted 10 vertebrae whilst filming the 128-foot-long jump for the film's finale, but it didn't deter him from wanting to make a sequel. Gone in 60 Seconds 2 was to be directed by Halicki also, but one very tragic incident stopped the sequel from being made. On the 20th of August 1989, Halicki was filming Gone with 60 Seconds 2 in Buffalo, New York. It was a stunt where a 160-foot tall water tower was supposed to topple to the ground. However, during preparations for the stunt, one of the cables attached to the water tower snapped unexpectedly and sheared off a telephone pole. The pole collapsed upon Halicki, killing him instantly. The 30 minutes of unfinished footage of Gone in 60 Seconds 2 was released as a short film in 2003, to go along with the documentary The Life and Times of H.B. Halicki, but that's where Halicki's tragic story ends. Number 6. The Conqueror. The Conqueror was a 1956 flop of a film that starred John Wayne as Genghis Khan. Although today The Conqueror can be seen as a very racist portrayal of Mongolian warriors, that's not the worst thing about the movie. The Conqueror was shot in many locations throughout Utah, but one specific location, St. George, was used for the exterior desert shots. Unfortunately, it was shot 137 miles downwind of the Nevada National Security Site, where nuclear fallout still existed from the nuclear weapons testing of 1953, also known as Operation Upshot Knothole. The crew knew about the tests, but it was deemed safe to film by the federal government. Even though the footage was completely usable and unaffected by the radiation, the crew weren't so fortunate. The curse presents itself as the cancer that 91 members of the crew contracted, and of which 46 died of years afterwards, including John Wayne himself. The producer Howard Hughes has gone on record that he felt incredibly guilty about the whole affair, as you'd expect. The Conqueror remains as one of the unluckiest productions in history. Number 5. Waterworld. Kevin Costner's incredibly expensive disappointment turned out to be so difficult to film that it was permanently behind schedule. It was rife with disasters that nearly destroyed filming altogether, and even nearly killed Kevin Costner himself. The most destructive force at play was when the set was hit by a hurricane, seemingly from out of nowhere whilst filming was going on. It rampaged through the production, destroying the whole multi-million-dollar set and throwing Kevin Costner out to sea, where he nearly drowned. Once filming got back on track, the horror didn't end, as Costner's stunt double nearly got lost at sea, prompting a search and rescue mission to get him back. All of these difficulties played on the mental states of everyone involved, causing arguments between production members. Joss Whedon found himself constantly rewriting scenes because of the impracticalities of filming on water with all the risks involved. He would later go on to claim that working on Waterworld was, quote, 7 weeks of hell. Number 4. Top Gun. Art Scholl was a highly decorated American stunt pilot, aerial cameraman, and flight instructor. In his career of flying, he worked on 5 films: Never Look Back, The Great Waldo Pepper, Where the Buffalo Roam, Prime Risk, and finally Top Gun, where he would perish during an aerial stunt. Normally, a tragedy such as this wouldn't call for a curse, but the death of Art Scholl was deeply mysterious. During the stunt in question, Scholl was attempting an aerial spin maneuver, something he'd done many times before. He'd prepared meticulously and practiced many times. However, this one time, something went wrong. He was unable to maintain altitude, and without warning, he crashed into the sea, reportedly dying upon impact. His last words being, "I have a problem. I have a real problem." Scholl and his plane were unable to be recovered because of how far into the sea he crashed, and thus the mystery of the plane stalling will never be solved. Number 3. The Wizard of Oz. Over time, the Technicolor marvel, which was The Wizard of Oz, has grown a reputation for being horrifically cursed, with tales of tragedy being told many years after the film's release. While some of these stories are fake, such as the story of a Munchkin's suicide being featured in the background of one particular shot, there are nonetheless still a number of true frightening stories to come from the production. Firstly, Buddy Ebsen, who originally played the Tin Man, had to be hospitalized and sat under an oxygen tent because he had a horrific reaction to the makeup. He wasn't the only one though, as Margaret Hamilton, the Wicked Witch of the West, had a similar reaction and received burns, causing the makeup artist to hurriedly remove her makeup in the middle of a scene. Betty Danko, the stunt double for Margaret Hamilton, injured her left leg when her broomstick exploded during a flying scene, and 2 of the winged monkey actors crashed to the ground when the wires that hoisted them into the air broke unexpectedly. People kept passing out from the heat of the set, the original director left halfway through, Hamilton nearly set herself on fire during the melting scene, and the film didn't even profit at the box office. It seems a miracle it was ever finished. Number 2. Superman. Out of all the film series to be cursed, it's surprising to see that a series about a DC superhero would be one of the most cursed of them all. The number of terrible things that happened to people who took part in the making of the Superman movies is shockingly numerous. Kirk Alyn's career quickly died after appearing in 2 low-budget 1940s Superman serials. Lee Quigley, who played Superman as a baby in the 1978 film, died of solvent abuse at the age of 14. George Reeves, who played Superman in 1951, died in mysterious circumstances in 1959. Finally, Christopher Reeves, who played Superman in the famous series that started in 1978, was paralyzed from the neck down in a horse riding event and died suddenly in 2004. That's not all, as numerous other people had their lives drastically altered or even destroyed after their involvement in a Superman film or TV show. Number 1. Atook. Production was supposed to start in 1982, but due to production tragedy, its script is still unfilmed to this day, without any plans to make it in the near future. The reason why is because any actor who showed interest in playing the lead role died before production began. First, there was John Belushi, who read the role at the beginning of 1982. He was set to play the character, but before production started, he was found dead in his room at the Chateau Marmont. Second was Sam Kinison, as Atook was set for production in 1988, with Kinison as the lead role, but Kinison walked out after 8 days. There were renegotiations in 1992, but Kinison died in a car accident on the 10th of April of that year. John Candy was set for the role in 1994, but again, John Candy died before production started during that very year. Finally, Chris Farley took interest in the main part, but just a few months after reading the script, Farley was found dead of a drug overdose, much like Belushi. And that is the end of our significantly chilling list. Do let me know down in that comment section if you know of any other films that were secretly cursed. As always, I've been Jess from What Culture. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. If you like, you can come say hi to me on my Twitter account where I'm @JessMcDonnell, but make sure you stay tuned to us here for plenty more great content.